Flashbulbs exploded in rapid succession, rock music roared through the air, and in the middle of the media, frenzy stepped a young face, chestnut hair catching the light, deep blue eyes radiating a strange magnetism. This wasn't just another newcomer to the catwalk. This was Elizabeth Jagger, daughter of rock legend Mick Jagger, frontman of the Rolling Stones, and supermodel Jerry Hall. From the very first moment Elizabeth set foot on a runway, the press erupted with questions. Was she merely a daughter of, or a true star in her own right? Carrying the immense cultural legacy of her parents, Elizabeth chose a path that seemed different, the fashion. But the fashion world was not just silk gowns and spotlights. Stepping into the industry meant facing skeptical eyes and whispers that her success was nothing more than a family privilege. Yet on the runway, Elizabeth didn't just walk, she told a story. Each stride seemed to merge with the rhythm of rock and roll, yet maintained the refinement of haute couture. She embodied the intersection of rebellion and elegance, where the wail of an electric guitar met the soft rustle of flowing silk. Her journey to prove herself, to carve her own place in an industry that has both celebrated and devoured countless talents. From the golden era of 90-second supermodels to the unspoken truths of the dark side of fashion had only just begun. Elizabeth Scarlett Jagger was born on the 2nd of March, 1984, in New York City, but her childhood was a constant dance between two worlds, the vibrant pulse of America and the old-world elegance of England. As the eldest daughter of Mick Jagger, the legendary Rolling Stones frontman, and supermodel Jerry Hall, Elizabeth grew up in an environment where art, music, and fashion blended seamlessly into daily life. Her earliest memories were tied to her father's tours. Even as a toddler, she was used to the chaos backstage, where guitars wailed late into the night and after-parties blurred into dawn. At the same time, her mother, Jerry Hall, statuesque at 1.83 meters with cascading blonde hair, was a reigning icon of the fashion world, a fixture on the covers of Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar. Elizabeth would often sit quietly in a corner, watching her mother prepare for photo shoots or slip into Yves Saint Laurent or Versace gowns. But her childhood wasn't all glitter and glamour. The relentless schedules of her parents meant long stretches where Elizabeth had to learn independence, growing up faster than most children her age. "My home wasn't like other homes. I grew up with suitcases and airports," she once recalled in an interview. This duality, the stage lights and the solitude, shaped her into someone both strong-willed and deeply sensitive. Educated in a multicultural environment, Elizabeth learned multiple languages and developed a strong love for the arts. When she wasn't in school, she spent hours sketching fashion designs, taking photographs, or trying on her mother's vintage pieces. By her teenage years, her delicate frame and the magnetic beauty she inherited from both parents began to draw attention. Still, she didn't rush into modeling. Elizabeth was keenly aware that the label Mick Jagger's daughter could be both a launching pad and an unbearable weight. What set her apart was that despite growing up in celebrity circles, she held on to a normal side. She devoured classic English literature and often took long walks through London's gardens when visiting England. This interplay between a glamorous world and a quieter, grounded life gave her a depth that later distinguished her from many of her peers, even among the celebrated 90-second supermodels. That unique energy, born from both privilege and longing, would become her secret weapon. It was the confidence of someone raised under spotlights, but also the hunger to prove her worth beyond a famous last name. And soon, the opportunity for Elizabeth to step into her own light arrived, in a way no one could have predicted. It was a moment that would mark the true beginning of her journey, one that would eventually expose her to the dazzling highs and the unfiltered shadows of the dark side of fashion. Elizabeth Jagger's entry into fashion was not the fairy tale discovered at a shopping mall story. It was the result of years of quiet observation, absorption, and preparation. Despite her illustrious family, Elizabeth kept her distance from the runway until she was 14, when she made her first public appearance as a model in a charity show organized by her mother, Jerry Hall, in London. That night, Elizabeth wore a long crimson satin gown, her hair flowing loose, her lips touched with the faintest hint of color. Her gaze held a mix of shyness and pride, catching the attention of industry insiders. Among them was a talent scout from Thierry Mugler, who approached Jerry Hall with an offer for Elizabeth to audition for an upcoming campaign. Jerry hesitated. She knew better than anyone that the fashion industry could be far harsher than it appeared. But Elizabeth felt differently. She wanted to try, not just out of love for fashion, but from a burning need to prove she was more than the Jagger Hall daughter. Her first casting was a trial by fire. The studio lights were blinding, dozens of lenses pointed at her, and instructions came rapid fire. She had to hold her composure even as her heart raced. But after just a few frames, the photographer whispered to the stylist, "She's got something very Mick, but softer." And with that, Elizabeth landed her first job, a Mugler campaign, marking the official start of her professional modeling career. The path forward, however, was anything but easy. As soon as her first photos were published, headlines appeared. Mick Jagger's daughter follows mother's footsteps. Elizabeth, a product of family fame? These articles tapped into her deepest fear, that her achievements would always be overshadowed by her parents' legacy. But instead of retreating, Elizabeth confronted it head-on. She began serious catwalk training, practicing poses and expressions in front of the mirror, and studying frame by frame the work of fashion icons from the golden era of 90s Supermodels, Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, dissecting their artistry and presence. In 2001, Elizabeth walked for Tommy Hilfiger at New York Fashion Week. This time, the shyness was gone, replaced by radiant confidence. The press began to change their tone. Elizabeth Jagger is not just the daughter of a rock legend, she's a face to watch. From that moment, the gates of the fashion world swung wide open. What made this turning point so pivotal was that Elizabeth entered during a transitional period in the industry. The lingering magic of the 90s Supermodels era was giving way to a faster, more commercialized scene. She was stepping into a space still rich with artistry but increasingly tinged with the pressures, politics, and compromises that would reveal to her the very real dark side of fashion. The early 2000s marked the brightest chapter of Elizabeth Jagger's modeling career. After her impressive debut, she quickly became a familiar presence at the world's top fashion weeks, from New York and London to Paris and Milan. Her appearance at Chanel in Paris in 2002 was a defining moment. Wearing a classic tweed dress, her eyes framed with sharp eyeliner, Elizabeth's poised glide down the runway made the room fall silent for a few seconds before applause erupted. Karl Lagerfeld, known for his notoriously high standards, offered her a rare compliment. She has the aura of someone who has lived more than her years. From there, Elizabeth's career expanded rapidly. She fronted campaigns for Tommy Hilfiger, Lanvin, and most notably Lancôme, bringing to each a unique blend of classic elegance and modern energy. Covers of Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar celebrated her beauty, a mix of her father's rebellious magnetism and her mother's regal grace. What set her apart was her ability to transform every runway into a story. For Versace, she exuded the sultry drama of an Italian film goddess. For Vivienne Westwood, she channeled the rebellious punk spirit of Britain. For Dior, she embodied timeless, understated luxury. This chameleon-like quality earned her the trust of designers, who entrusted her with their most important collections. In 2003, she appeared in a globally recognized Marks & Spencer campaign alongside other British fashion icons, a savvy move that connected her high fashion image with a broader public audience. But behind the glamour, the pace was grueling. Elizabeth's schedule meant constant flights across continents, often sleeping more on planes than in her own bed. She also had to maintain a physique that met the industry's exacting standards, a challenge for someone who genuinely loved food and resisted extreme restrictions. Rather than succumbing to the pressure, she embraced a disciplined routine of yoga, balanced nutrition, and, most importantly, mental focus. Amid the fame, Elizabeth stayed true to herself. She turned down film offers that would have diluted her image, choosing instead to focus entirely on fashion, a field where she felt her identity was most authentic. This decision kept her brand refined, never overexposed or reduced to a mere celebrity commodity. Her peak years proved she had the strength to step out of her parents' shadow and build a legacy of her own. In many ways, she carried the essence of the 90s Supermodels, artistry, individuality, and command of the runway, into a new era. Yet the fashion world was changing fast, and with its changes came the creeping presence of the dark side of fashion, shifting trends, ruthless competition, and the unrelenting demand to reinvent or fade away. In an industry where nearly everything can be priced, packaged, and sold, Elizabeth Jagger stood out for her determination to protect her personal identity. She was never content to simply be a clothes hanger. She sought to tell a story, to transmit something genuine with every step she took. From the earliest days of her career, Elizabeth set a rule for herself. She would only work with brands she felt connected to in spirit or that respected artistic integrity. This meant turning down lucrative offers that didn't align with her values. On one occasion, a major fast fashion label offered her a contract that would have paid double what she'd earned from a couture campaign. But it came with the condition of completely overhauling her image to fit mass-market tastes. Elizabeth declined without hesitation. "I don't want my name tied to products I don't believe in," she said. She also spoke openly about uncomfortable truths in the modeling world. In a 2004 interview, at the height of her career, she addressed the pressures of maintaining industry-standard body measurements and the harm caused by idolizing a single body ideal. "I've seen friends destroy themselves just to fit into a sample dress. Fashion should celebrate diversity, not enforce a mold." Her remarks stirred debate but earned her the respect of many young women, and of those nostalgic for the authenticity and individuality of the 90s Supermodels. Elizabeth navigated her dual identity with care. Though she occasionally appeared alongside her father at music events, she maintained a clear boundary between being Mick Jagger's daughter and Elizabeth Jagger, model. When asked why she didn't leverage her family connections more aggressively, she smiled. "If my success comes only from the Jagger name, then it isn't really mine." Another defining trait was her commitment to philanthropy. She regularly collaborated with charities, particularly those focused on women's rights and education. She used her platform to raise awareness for anti-domestic violence initiatives and to advocate for the protection of young models entering the industry. These bold choices ensured that Elizabeth never became a mass-produced fashion face, even though she had stood on some of the most prestigious runways in the world. She chose a narrower, more personal path, one in which every project bore her signature and respect for the craft. Yet, as the unwritten rules of the dark side of fashion dictate, no one can remain at the center forever. Trends shift, markets evolve, and careers can be derailed by forces beyond talent or willpower. A sudden turn of events was about to pull Elizabeth away from the lights, leading her into the most challenging chapter of her journey. By the mid-2010s, Elizabeth Jagger's appearances on major runways had grown noticeably rare. On the surface, the reason seemed simple. She wanted to spend more time with her family and explore other creative avenues. But behind this retreat was a series of pressures and private challenges. The fashion industry was entering a new era, one where Instagram followers and online engagement began to define a model's value as much as, if not more than, her craft. Brands favored fresh, social media-savvy faces over seasoned professionals. Elizabeth, never one to turn her private life into public content, gradually found herself sidelined from the global campaigns she once dominated. In 2016, she faced controversy after refusing to participate in a runway show due to ethical concerns. The brand in question had been accused of labor exploitation. While her decision was applauded by some colleagues, it made certain industry executives wary, fearing she might take a similar stand against them in the future. Compounding the situation, Elizabeth suffered a severe knee injury from overtraining, forcing her to step away from catwalk work entirely for a time. For someone who had built her identity around the runway, this was devastating. "It felt like part of me had been taken away," she admitted in a rare interview. The media, which had once praised her endlessly, now began to ask, has Elizabeth Jagger disappeared? Comparisons to her mother, Jerry Hall, who remained visible in fashion well into her later years, only deepened the pressure. During her time away, Elizabeth immersed herself in painting and writing while continuing her philanthropic work. She made only occasional appearances at small art exhibitions or charity events. For the public, her image began to fade, like a once brilliant star quietly drifting out of orbit. Then, in 2019, she made a surprise return to the runway during a small show at London Fashion Week. It wasn't a grand comeback. Instead, it felt like a graceful farewell, a nod to those who had followed her journey from the start. Her quiet exit from the mainstream was neither scandalous nor bitter. Yet it left a unique void in the industry, the absence of a model who had bridged rock and roll spirit with couture refinement, and who had managed to hold on to her integrity even when navigating the dark side of fashion. Elizabeth Jagger's story is a reminder that the fashion world can be as fleeting as it is intoxicating. Like many before her, from the golden age of 90-second supermodels to the digital generation, she discovered that even the brightest lights eventually dim. The difference was that she chose when and how hers would fade. Today, Elizabeth Jagger rarely graces magazine covers or international runways. Yet, for those who once saw her walk, the image remains unforgettable. Deep blue eyes, a confident stride tinged with rebellion, and an aura that was both regal and free-spirited. Her legacy in fashion is not measured by the number of contracts she signed or titles she collected, but by the way she preserved her identity in an industry that constantly tries to mold people into fixed ideals. She proved that even if you are born into fame, you can still forge a value that is entirely your own. That modeling is not just about physical beauty, but also about the principles you choose to defend. Elizabeth once said, "I don't want to look back and see that I did everything just to please others. I want to see that I lived and worked as myself." That sentiment, simple yet steadfast, captures her journey perfectly. Perhaps Elizabeth Jagger was never the brightest star in the conventional sense, but she stands as proof that in fashion, just as in life, true value isn't measured by the glare of the spotlight, but by the impression you leave on those who witnessed your work. For admirers of the 90-second supermodels and for those who understand the unvarnished truths of the dark side of fashion, Elizabeth's light remains softer now, but no less enduring.